It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how are we feeling on this Thursday?
Disappointed it's Thursday because I keep going through my day and it feels like Friday. And then
I said that to remind you what day it was. I do that every once in a while.
Yeah, appreciate that. Good looking out. Yeah, it feels like a Friday. It's a Thursday. We got an injury report. We got no practice tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be really weird. That one's
So how's that go? What's tomorrow?
It's Ricky
Got what to do with your hands?
I don't really know what to do with my hands. Yeah, I'm going to write. And then right after the show tomorrow, I'm driving to Baltimore. So
okay. Before we dive into anything, normally we just use the YouTube comments to get the questions and stuff. But if you notice, I'm a little bit in a different position. You can see a little bit more of that arcade blitz, NFL blitz machine behind me as well. Reason being, I repositioned for the folks, and it's funny because I did this prior to going through the comments anyway. But I feel like I did this for Randy F. Tobias, who said, "Love the content. However, Smitty, can you please get some sort of screen for your lights? Every time you move your head, I get blinded. So I'm only gonna do this once, but that's for you." It won't happen again. Had to do it one last time. No, but literally, I noticed it more so like yesterday. I don't know. I mean, it's probably been like that. And for anybody that watches on YouTube, I apologize for that. But yeah, we're good now. We got it down. We're going to be like this going forward, and hopefully that's good. So appreciate the comment, though. Let me know about it, Randy. And Alan says that you are a long-time watcher, listener. So shout outs. We appreciate you tapping into the content. Alan, you mentioned the injury report. Let's kind of go through that because now we have game designations for these players. DNP and out for this game, George Pickens and Justin Fields. Limited participation from DeShon Elliott today, however, doubtful to play with his hamstring injury. Limited participation and questionable, Larry Ogunjobi with his groin coming back from that. Donte Jackson obviously working his way back from his back injury. And then no injury designation for TJ Watt with his ankle injury, who looks good to go. No injury designation this one, so he's going to go in some capacity. We'll see what that capacity is on Saturday and how it's feeling. I mean, I guess I'll just leave it to you in terms of taking it away, which one you want to start with and kind of go through here. I'd say, I mean, doubtful pretty much means DeShon Elliott's not playing. Maybe some more question than we would have thought for like a Larry Ogunjobi. I think that you said that he's probably going to play, or he said he was going to play. And then Donte, I know he did something today, but I have a hard time seeing him go on Saturday as well. But I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, so let's start with TJ Watt. No injury status was a surprise to me. There's a one video up here on the YouTube channel, him doing some drills. Not at 100%. I mean, at like 12%, 18.5%, somewhere in there. And so I don't know how to. And TJ himself said after practice that he expects to be a game time decision. So I don't really know how to make all of that connect. If TJ was just being cautious or what. I'm skeptical that he is going to be 100%. Obviously, he's going to play since he was listed as in. But yeah, I mean, it's been a strange trying to jive the injury report with what I'm seeing week anyway. So yeah, that was big news. I had thought that he was going to play, but I think now obviously it's pretty definitive that he will. And then the questionable guys, Donte Jackson got back to practice today, limited capacity. Funny video I tweeted of him stretching upside down. I guess that's what one does when he has a back injury. And then Larry Ogunjobi told me he's good to go. So questionable, but I mean, that's probably with a soft tissue, just sort of hedging in case something flares up after today's practice or after today's walkthrough. But as of right now, he is planning to play. I would feel very confident about those two guys playing. No idea about Donte Jackson. Hard to say. And then, DeShon Elliott, doubtful, not going to play. George Pickens and Justin Fields out, obviously not going to play, although George Pickens was at practice again today running. And I would say looks like a guy who could play on Christmas against the Chiefs. Like he looks like he could play this week, but I understand the caution because an aggravation ends this season. And so I just think it makes sense to be cautious with it. You have another short week. I think there's a chance that they really wanted to push things. George could play, but he may play against the Chiefs.
Yeah. I think the type of injury like we're talking about here with it being a hamstring too, would you say that's, I mean, really the difference? Like TJ with what it is, he can give it a shot at the very least. Like if it's not feeling right, there's not as much, like it's like pulling a hamstring or a grade 2 or whatever George has going on there. Like I'm not saying that TJ can not make that worse, but like I feel like it's a different scenario when you're talking about a low ankle sprain as opposed to a grade 2 hamstring injury like with George, in terms of just like a potential re-aggravation of the injury or making it worse.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a potential to re-injure something, but it's not going to be the same as like if you re-injure a soft tissue injury, you're doubling or tripling the rest time now. Like whereas opposed to like if you have a more physical injury, you're probably just going through it again. And so I think this is a smart way to approach it. TJ playing because it's an ankle. Larry, we'll see, but wants to play. Also, Larry was sort of the first one back to practice of this group, and was the farthest along, and so that makes sense as well. And then the Donte Jackson with the back and nerve. I don't really have enough experience dealing with those to have any idea.
I pinched a nerve in my lower back as well. I mean, I'm not a pro athlete. I'm not trying to come back from that and then compete at that level or anything like that. But man, that nagged for a while as well.
Yeah,
like
I just think it's hard for me to really judge what they're doing from an injury standpoint because I just it's not something you see a lot. So
yeah, I do think to a certain point, like beyond this, I'd be surprised personally if we see Donte Jackson. And we could talk about that a little bit more. But I think beyond this, it could end up being just more about like his pain tolerance to play through it, which we've seen him play through a lot of stuff this year. So we'll see if that happens. I want to ask you though, with TJ, before we move on from the injury report stuff, if you think that with what he's dealing with, if he's going to give it a go, if they'll still utilize him the same way, not necessarily from a rep standpoint, but just like the alignment because of the injury that it was being on that plant foot. Like we saw how he hurt it. If he does, is he going to be able to be in that same position again, or could they rush him from the right side? Could they rush him over the middle, maybe with Herbig and Highsmith both on the field? Like, do you think they'll use him differently because of the injury?
Absolutely. I think they could use him on the right side instead, either flip him and Highsmith or whatever. But also, last time against the Ravens, you remember they were using a 5-man rush with Patrick Queen as like the kind of collector, right? Where like he would wait and delay the rush to see where Jackson was going, and then he would go get him. And I guess you could call it a spy, whatever. They could easily put that 3 outside linebacker package out there and use Watt for that role, where he's not, going to be engaged with a tackle on every play and putting all that stress and torque and bend on his lower half. Kind of play him more like a stand-up linebacker. But then you also have, if you want to blitz him, it's TJ freaking Watt, and he's pretty good at that. And have him kind of be that. So I think there's a possibility they could do a little bit of that as well. They've used that package. I remember they debuted it against the Ravens back in 2020 when they had Highsmith and Bud Dupree and TJ. They've used that package against the Ravens and Lamar Jackson before. So I think that is another way they can kind of find a way to use TJ without necessarily getting him beat up.
I don't know if you had this conversation with him or like with anybody that's dealt with this injury in the past. What is the hardest part to navigate about it? And like, what would be, is it rushed from that left side because of the plant foot, the way that it is? Or like, is he going to not be able to do certain things, but be able to do certain things? Or what is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, TJ kind of brushed that question off today. I don't think that there will be one thing that will be super hard. It's just going to be about dealing with the pain and then keeping, swelling down and keeping the full range of motion throughout the course of the game when he gets stepped on and twisted and landed on and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I was thinking too. I was curious. Like, could he do like spot drop stuff, or like, what's the back pedal like with that type of injury? I'm honestly like my mind's going a lot of different directions in terms of what the functionality is going to be for him with that.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say. I think we'll have to see. I mean, obviously, like I said, go watch that video.
Mm-hmm.
Not like you're getting a lot from that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Flipping around to the other side of things, Rashad Bateman's in a boot now. We talked about Rashad Bateman injuring his foot at practice, but they haven't rolled him out. Still listed as questionable, along with Nelson Aguilar, who they're hoping to get back in case they don't have Rashad Bateman. Trying to clear concussion protocol here. We already know they're not going to have Donte Johnson. Two other starters questionable after being limited throughout this week of practice. Odafe Owe and Daniel Fale. How do you Falele? You pronounce the entire
Lele.
There
With
you go. All right.
Polynesian
So
last names, you always
you
pronounce
pronounce. Yeah,
every letter.
I
So you
thought so.
never
All right.
combine them.
I thought
That's
so.
a
Okay.
life hack for you that will last you all forever and ever. Alan Saunders
Mhm.
taught me how to pronounce Polynesian last names. Now, depending on your
Well,
field, that might be that might be extremely useless. But when you're talking for football, for a guy who works in football, it's very useful. So Fa'alele.
I felt like that was kind of in the back here in the Rolodex from somewhere, and it honestly, it could be from multiple sources. You could have told me that in the past, or however, my co-host of my other podcast, Tyler Weeks, big BYU guy, he
Yeah,
might have put that
they
in
got
my
a few.
mind as
They
well
got
from
a
the
few.
past.
Yeah.
But anyway, so kind of going through the Ravens injury
I
report
think
there. What
you know
stands
what? I
out to you
think we
about
talked
this?
about that on the pod. Fa'utanu,
Ah, okay, yeah, maybe
right?
that's probably where it was from
Yeah,
then. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
probably where it was from. Um, but yeah, when you look at the Ravens injury report here, two wide receivers with injuries, and obviously not having Deontay Johnson in this one, and then an edge rusher in there starting right guard questionable as well. What stands out to you about this, and could it change the Ravens' approach?
Well, the wide receiver room's a disaster. Aguilar, concussion questionable. Bateman, foot questionable. That just leaves Flowers. That leaves Tylan Wallace, who actually had a couple of good games this year, but is mostly a
Mhm.
special teamer.
Right.
And that leaves Tez Johnson, who's their
Walker,
rookie. Tez
Tez Walker.
Walker,
Yeah.
who's their
Mhm.
rookie from Carolina, who has like one catch. And then some practice squad guys, potentially including former Steelers wide receiver Anthony Miller, maybe,
Oh,
who's been on that
didn't
practice
even know he was
squad.
there. Yeah.
But it's not exactly like some kind of Malik Cunningham is there, former quarterback turned wide
Hmm.
receiver. Then a guy named Dayton Wade out of Mississippi, who's a real little guy, and then a guy named Keith Kirkwood at Temple, who's a bigger bodied, kind of
Yeah,
reminds
I
me of
know those guys for sure.
Miles Boykin a little bit. But like no one coming up that I would call
Hmm.
noteworthy. It's not like they got OBJ stashed on their practice squad. Speaking of which, like, why haven't one of these two teams signed him? You got to
I was
think,
just gonna
like,
say,
he's just sitting there. The Steelers and the Ravens are going to play each other with a grand total of like 4 NFL wide receivers between the two teams, and
Mhm.
can't
Well,
get a
that's what I was
protocol
gonna say
yet.
is like this Ravens wide receiver room, not necessarily something to write home about. It's certainly not a strength of their team when healthy. And then you talk about being down two guys that they've had, and then obviously Deontay Johnson with that situation, what that's been. Yeah, I mean, this passing game funnels through obviously the tight ends and what they are as weapons, but obviously just Lamar's ability to extend plays and not necessarily need guys that are elite separators at the line of scrimmage because it becomes just backyard ball and who can get open after running around for 10 seconds. But yeah, I think, like I mentioned this yesterday, I think the way that Rashad Bateman has started to come on, I think that's certainly a hit to that receiver room. But Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are really the two guys, along with Zay Flowers, that you're circling in this passing game anyway. Although Zay Flowers specifically against the Steelers, like he just goes like brain dead for whatever reason when he plays, ball smacking off his face mask. He's had like 5 drops over the last two games combined. So I don't know what to make of that. But anyway, yeah, to me it's about the tight ends in the pass game anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. The Ravens use their tight ends probably more than anybody else in the league, and just in terms of like the percentage of their passing offense. And speaking of which, like just like sidebar here with the Anthony Miller thing, they're like a whole
Mhm.
bunch of very random Steelers connections. Like Art Millette obviously has been there, but he's hurt. Right, he's on the IR, won't play this week. Deontay Johnson, obviously whatever you want to call this. I don't know, not suspended, but not playing this week. And then Anthony Miller, along with Chris Wormley and Desmond
Oh,
King,
yeah, that's right.
all on the practice squad. So there's like 5 ex-Steelers on the Ravens, and potentially none of them might play, depending on which wide receivers get called out. It's very strange.
Yeah. Desmond King operated as their punt returner last week. I'm not sure who their normal one is, if he's still hurt or what's going on with that. But I know that he operated for them as that against the Giants last week, because I was watching the game and they said his name and I was like, oh, didn't even know he was on that roster. So we'll see if it's 2 straight weeks in terms of that. Owe and Fa'alele also injured, though. What do we make of those injuries and how big they could be? Obviously, we're down a starting right guard and one of their edge rushers for a team that, I mean, doesn't generate a whole lot there in that area anyway. That could obviously be big.
Yeah, we'll stay on offense first. I mean, Fa'alele has been playing right guard. Ben Cleveland is there, who's a guy who's kind of played a whole bunch.
Yeah.
Fa'alele is gigantic. He's one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen. He's like 6'8", 340 or something ridiculous like that.
Him and as a right tackle.
Obviously, Ben Cleveland is not bringing the same size or level of physicality to the position, but he's also like a really big guy. I don't honestly think that's some kind of huge drop off where the Ravens are just going to be like crushed. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Now on defense, Owe to me has been their best edge rusher. I know Calvin Noy has more sacks, but I feel like Owe has been more consistently in the backfield and causing havoc. They'll probably start Tavius Robinson instead, who's a 4th round pick from last year, came out of nowhere really, and he passed David Ojabo, who was a 2nd round pick in 2022, had an Achilles injury from college. He was at Michigan, that cost him his whole rookie year, and then was it a knee too? I think he had. They'll lean on they have young talent, but it's young. And then they have Calvin Noy, who's not young. So I like the players they have there, but clearly it's less proven commodities in terms of their ability to impact the game. And I think it'll have to be a big gift if the Ravens are going to win. I think they need to get more out of Madubuike. I think he's been a bit of a disappointment this year compared to what he's been in the past. The Steelers
he's got the bag too.
The Steelers interior, their offensive line, pretty good run blocking, can be beaten in pass pro as we saw last week from time to time. I think that's a guy the Ravens really need to step up with a way out. I don't know how much more you can really lean on those young edges. I think it's got to come from somewhere else.
I'm not saying that it's showed up on the box score in the way that it did last year when Madubuike had his breakout, but I almost feel like it's now been a Travis Jones year where he's been really good for them in the middle and kind of having his own little breakout. Again, not necessarily from a numbers standpoint. He only has 1 sack this year.
He's more of a run stuffer first and foremost, and then kind of gets to the other stuff as he gets to it, which is okay. But not going to help replace an edge rusher.
Sure. Absolutely. So this kind of plays into the injury stuff, and I think this is a really good question. Also, it comes from the username is BeaverDam724, and that is the 724 area code here. Beaver, I'm wondering, is this Beaver County? Is this Beaver in general? The area, might be local, might be pretty close to this person, so appreciate you tapping in. Says, if you were building an offensive game plan without George Pickens, what does that look like? And similarly, what about a defensive game plan without DeShon Elliott? Not comparing them apples to apples here, but it does feel like they're equally important to each side of the ball.
Yeah, so let's start with defense. Against the Baltimore Ravens, game plan without DeShon Elliott basically means you just don't play nickel. You just keep, 4 DBs on the field for almost the entire game. KZ playing center field, Minka down in the box somewhere doing something with Likely or Andrews or Justice Hill or something like that. And then you just keep all four linebackers out. I think that's the easy adjustment without Elliott. Honestly, don't think that one's hard. Well, the difficulty will be when the Ravens go like 22 personnel and you've got Ricard out there and you've got Likely out there and you've got Andrews out there. And now you're dealing with like KZ trying to tackle one of those guys or, Roberts having to cover one of those guys going downfield, right? You kind of have to pick one or the other, and neither of those are necessarily great options for all those spots. But I think that one is, I don't want to say it's easy because it makes you pretty predictable and you can't do it all the time. And it doesn't really work in like 3rd and long, for example. But I think it's like the Steelers just can do stuff they are already doing all the time anyway. They're just going to do more of this and less of that, And so I think that's pretty okay. On offense, I don't know that there is a successful possible game plan for this offense with George Pickens to go out here and like score. Like there is no game plan that scores 40 points for the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. It just does not exist. Like God himself as offensive coordinator would not score 40 points. Like there, it just does. It's not there. Like there's not, I don't know. This is a really, really interesting matchup because the Ravens have been terrible at pass defense. I mean, just terrible. But the trend is improving for them the last few weeks. They made some changes. They moved Kyle Hamilton around. They brought in our Darius Washington. And they kind of changed up the way they're playing. Dean Pease is a certified OG a defensive mind. Changed up some stuff. They've been playing better. Their run defense has been good all the way through. I feel like this is a game where you just smash your head into a brick wall 47 times and hope that you do it slightly better than they do. Like, I don't know. That's all I got.
I wanted to ask you from a defensive standpoint, because we were up with both these players last week as well. What you think shifts, if anything, in terms of the way that they defended Philly as opposed to Baltimore without DeShon Elliott?
It's a lot easier to be aggressive with not going to nickel because, the especially if Bateman's hurt, the Ravens receivers are just not that good. And so it's a lot easier to leave your guys on islands with them. It's a lot easier to let KZ be the one safety back there and feel good about it. It's nothing they didn't do. It's just easier to do it. Also, I think the fact that Baltimore's offensive line is nowhere near as good as Philly's means that you don't necessarily need to spend like so much time and effort dealing with the running game, even though Derrick Henry is every bit as good as Saquon Barkley and can certainly take over a game and beat you. I think the quality of the offensive line being much less makes it like slightly less of an urgent problem where you feel like you just cannot leave a light box in there or you will get crushed. You can mix it up a little bit. So not entirely different. I think it's a little easier to play man-to-man against the Ravens because the number of tight ends they use, they're not going to spread you out in 11 very often. And so especially not without Bateman. So I think they're a little bit easier to defend than Philly is. Not a ton, but pretty much the same idea.
From an offensive standpoint, somebody that's going to have to step up for this passing game without George Pickens in this game if they are going to have success, Pat Freiermuth, and that's where we go for another question. Busy B says, see a lot of people crapping on the Freiermuth extension. Not sure that I agree with that. Think he's actually having a nice season if you look at it in a vacuum. I will say, though, I am a bit underwhelmed in terms of what I expected with the volume of him within the passing game. Does that make sense? Am I way off base? What do you think? Thanks.
Hang on. Before I answer this one, I need you to read the other one too.
Oh, and then, okay, so this can kind of go into it as well. BWise418 says, you guys repeatedly said all off season and going into the year, Pat was wide receiver too, yet you continue to change your story after every game.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but just gonna double check in case it's changed since the last time I looked. Yeah. Pat Freiermuth is second on the Steelers in targets, second on the Steelers in receptions, second on the Steelers in yards, first on the Steelers in touchdowns, second in passes for a first down. He's second to, I guess third if you count Ben Skoranek, and success rate. He's by far first in catch rate besides Ben Skoranek. I don't know what you're not seeing.
There's a lot of first and seconds being said in there.
It feels like he is wide receiver 2 with a bullet. Look, this offense is not a dynamic offense. Like, it does not have the ball that much to do a whole bunch. It's not. It lacks talent in a lot of places. Pat Freiermuth is like 8th in fantasy points amongst tight ends or something like that, depending on your scoring system.
Yeah.
I don't know that I expected a lot more than this for right now. I think this is an offense that has potential if you start to add some more pieces to it and the offensive line can protect a little better to really open up and develop into the kind of passing offense that lets you have, a player have the kind of season that, say, George Kittle has or Jonnu Smith. So that's a better example, right? Like Jonnu Smith having I do not think is a better player than Pat Freiermuth at this stage in their career, but having a much better statistical season. I mean, look at the talent around him. Look at the offensive system he's playing in. They're just not going to throw that much in general, but also they're not very good at it. So I don't know that I was expecting a ton more than what we've seen from Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah, like I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I know that like pretty much having this conversation the entire time, I was kind of giving this like asterisk of saying the de facto number 2 option in this passing game, which has been the case. Like I didn't say that it was going to be a dynamic passing offense. They're going to throw for 5,000 yards, score 40 touchdowns through the air, and he's going to be the number 2 guy and all of that. I just said I think he's going to be the second fiddle of the passing offense behind George Pickens, which I feel like has come to fruition when you look at all of these.
Yeah, obviously. Now, like I mean, could he do a little bit better? He's on the doorstep of 500 yards. Considering he's healthy, I probably thought he would do about 750. So maybe like a few less yards than I thought he would get, but already has 6 touchdowns. I mean, I don't know. I think
there's 2 tight ends that have 8. He's tied for the third highest.
One of my preseason predictions that Pat Freiermuth was going to set his career touchdown record.
Yeah, he had 7 his rookie year.
Yeah. So, he needs 2 more in 3 games. I feel all right about that. Yeah.
And he needs not that many more yards, like less than 20 to be the Steelers' all-time tight end leader for yards through their first 4 seasons.
Oh, okay.
So he will pass Eric why am I blanking on the name? Eric Green. Yes, the great Eric Green for that. Heath didn't even have 2,000 receiving yards actually in his first 4 seasons. Surprised me when I looked that up.
They barely threw. It's the same thing. Like those early, they didn't throw that much.
Yeah, that's true, but at the same time, it was like 1,800, 1,900 yards or something like that. But anyway, the first part of that. So with what Busy B was saying in terms of thinking or trying to evaluate if they were getting their worth in terms of the contract, what is your take on that?
I don't look at that way. The contract is reflective of what the player is worth on the open market, not what, like, it doesn't. I don't think that once it's spent, it doesn't matter. Like I don't. I guess the idea is like, are you saying like he's not living up to the contract? I don't think I would agree with that. I think he's still a player that would be worth what he got in August now. So
yeah,
like that's so like if you want to make an argument about a player like that, let's say like, okay, Minkah Fitzpatrick. If the Steelers cut Minkah Fitzpatrick right now, he would obviously, well, maybe not right now, after this season, he would obviously sign a new contract fairly easily. Would he sign a contract worth as much as he is making for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, coming off the year he has had? I think maybe not. Like, I think probably not. It's close, but I think probably not. I don't think the market for Pat would be any more or less than it was in August. So I don't think that that's changed.
And honestly, like a lot of the advanced metrics in terms of like like his open score, like they're very kind to him as well. Basically, like he should be more productive just based off his own performance, but obviously plays a position that is dependent on somebody else getting him the ball. But independent, if you just watch him, feels like he should be a much more productive player based off what he himself is doing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree with that. He's the one guy that you can kind of say, like, when you're looking at the passing game, it's like he's open. Like the rest of them, not really. But Freiermuth is routinely getting open, and just they're not finding him. It's just a struggle for us, man. It always has been about working over the middle. Like it's not easy for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, anything else to add?
No, man. I think that's it. We got DB tomorrow. We got a morning rush tomorrow. To go. Aaron's gonna have a cool guest.
Oh yeah, that's right. Tomorrow's a different Friday.
Should I tease it? Nah, we'll just say a member of the Steelers staff will be on Steelers Spotlight with Aaron Becker on Friday this week. There you go.
There we go. Looking forward to that. All right. Well, in that case, Alan, tell the people where they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now sites account SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel so don't miss an episode of Steelers Morning Drive, Steelers Afternoon Rush, Steelers Spotlight, Sights and Sounds, Locker Room Interviews. There's TJ talking about his injury up there. One video, up 2 videos is TJ looking like he's about 90 instead of just wearing 90, working his way through the pads at practice today. And, of course, my morning rush on Arthur Smith getting a bad rap. Okay.
Man, I'll be honest. That was pretty, especially at the beginning of that when you were rattling it off. That was a pretty impressive speed run. I thought you were gonna get through all of that in like 15 seconds. It's kind of tempo slowed down a little bit there when you started talking about the TJ video, but either way, it was impressive. As Alan said, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments. We want your thoughts on anything that we talked about today or a question for a future episode. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from. Search Steelers Afternoon Drive and you'll find us there. You'll also find us on TikTok, searching the same thing, and then you'll find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.